Europe is preparing for a reality it has not faced in a long time. A large-scale war on its soil with Russia, and this time, potentially without America's help. Since the Ukraine war started nearly 4 years ago, intelligence assessments in Brussels, Berlin, Paris, all pointing to the same conclusion, that Russia could be ready for a broader conflict by the end of this decade. And so Europe is racing against time. Defense budgets are being doubled, new weapon systems are being rushed into production, old military bunkers are being restored, and plans are being made to train every adult male for war in a way. Militaries are expanding their ranks for the first time in a generation. And the fear driving all of this is that Washington's attention may have already shifted to another part of the world, leaving Europe to defend itself against a nuclear-armed Russia. Now, recently, Germany unveiled its new autonomous underwater vehicle, a potential tool for NATO allies looking to monitor submarine activity and protect undersea infrastructure. The system, called Grey Shark, uses hydrogen fuel cells, artificial intelligence, and a bionic design inspired by penguins to operate for months without surfacing. The craft, which roughly is the length of a torpedo, is basically designed to glide beneath the surface for long periods of time, carrying sensors that map the seabed and also detect activity around pipelines, cables, territorial waters. The two German companies that unveiled it, describing it as one of the world's first fully autonomous, long-range underwater vehicle. The system that they argue could reshape how NATO nations monitor submarines, safeguard seabed infrastructure, and patrol increasingly contested waters. The company is also saying that the system is being developed at a time when underwater security is becoming increasingly complex, especially for Europe. In the Baltic Sea, European governments have reported suspected sabotage attempts on pipelines and communication cables, as well as the presence of what analysts describe as a Russian shadow fleet operating without transponders. The vehicle is intended to give NATO countries a way to monitor wide areas of the sea with only a small number of operators. The Grey Shark has been launched as the European Commission prepares to present its Defense Readiness Roadmap 2030. A military plan that is reportedly being reviewed by NATO allies. It warns EU countries they have 5 years to close critical capability gaps if they are to deter an increasingly militarized Russia. The draft also says by 2030, Europe needs a sufficiently strong defense posture to credibly deter its adversaries and respond to aggression, quote unquote. The roadmap basically identifies 9 urgent capability gaps, from drones and anti-drones to artillery, naval systems, cyber and air missile defense. Also calls for projects in all priority areas to begin by early 2026. A race against time, like we said. The plan pushes EU nations to buy weapons together, set joint procurement targets, and expand defense industrial capacity while mapping supply chain bottlenecks for critical raw materials. And it carries a price tag. The EU executive wants to mobilize up to 800 billion through loans for weapons programs, the European Defence Fund, and the next EU budget cycle starting in 2027. And then there is the anxiety, of course, the fear of having to fight without America. And it's also shaping political discourse across Europe. Already early this month, the United States decided to pull out troops from Romania, which borders war-torn Ukraine, leaving only 1,000 US personnel in the country. In France, the chief of defense staff triggered a storm when he told local mayors that France must be ready to lose its children if it is serious about defending Europe. If the message was provocative, it came from a place shared by defense analysts across Europe. The war in Ukraine is not an isolated crisis. It's a preview of the tools and tactics that Russia would deploy against NATO if confrontation expands. And no tactic has transformed warfare more than drones. On NATO's eastern flank, militaries are racing to plug gaps in their defenses. Poland has started training on the American-made Mirov system, one of the few platforms that brought down swarms of Russian Shahed drones in Ukraine at a sustainable cost. Romania has ordered the same system after a Russian strike forced evacuations in its region, and in fact the closest the war has come to displacing civilians inside a NATO state. NATO commanders admitting there is no way to fully shield Eastern Europe from drones. The priority now is to protect critical infrastructure like air bases, power lines, LNG terminals, telecom cables, and border crossings. The assets Moscow would target first in a wider conflict. That logic extends beyond equipment to people. Even Polish teens are studying in the first drone class overseen by the military. In Warsaw, the Polish government, in fact, has launched Europe's most ambitious civilian defense program since the Cold War. Up to 500,000 citizens, teenagers, adults, retirees will be trained in crisis readiness by the end of next year. Officials saying Ukraine's early war experience showed that no society is prepared on day one unless ordinary people know how to respond. Now, on the ground, NATO forces are drilling for speed, the deciding factor in any future confrontation. Armored units in Romania have been rehearsing crossings over the river there, practicing how to move firepower across terrain within hours, not weeks. The scenario is pretty clear. Reinforce the eastern flank before Russia can exploit a gap. From the Baltic seabed to EU boardrooms, from military doctrine to civilian mobilization, Europe is now planning backwards from a deadline, and that's 2030. The threat is not all hypothetical. The only uncertainty is whether Europe can build enough capability, enough industrial scale, enough political unity before the time runs out.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.